Qualifying for the US Marathon Olympic Trials just got a whole lot tougher. In this video, I'm going to go over why you should care about the US Olympic Marathon Trials. Also, we are going to go over the brand new standards for qualifying for the 2028 US Marathon Olympic Trials, the new standards compared to the old ones, and all of my thoughts about this change. And then finally, we will wrap up this video with me going over my plan to qualify for the US Marathon Olympic Trials for 2028, and then give you some tips on how you can do so too if you are aiming to do so. All right, let's get into it. The US Marathon Olympic Trials is one of the biggest spectacles of American distance running that we ever get. I often talk to people that ask me if I've run the Boston Marathon, or they tell me if there are runners that they're training to try and qualify for the Boston Marathon. For obvious reasons, it's a historic event. It's one of the most prestigious and difficult to qualify for. The Olympic Trials race is sort of like trying to qualify for Boston, but on a completely different level. To put it in context, the Boston Marathon comes once every year, and 30,000 people qualify. The US Marathon Olympic Trials, typically there's only about 200 men and 200 women that qualify, and it only comes once every 4 years. It's one of the top goals that many distance runners aim to achieve. You'll note that there are hundreds of people all around the country every single Olympic cycle that set this lofty goal to qualify for the trials, and it is not an easy one, and many people will try. Some will succeed, most will probably fail. Okay, let's talk about the qualifying standards for the Olympic trials. First, you should note that to qualify for the Olympic trials in the marathon is different than any of the track events. For the marathon, all you have to do is run faster than the qualifying mark on a qualifying course. The USATF this year actually held a town hall where they had several members of USATF as well as other representatives, including athletes, jump in and give their input to try and help determine both the field size and the potential qualifying standards. In this meeting, which I was not a part of by the way, I talked to friends who were in this meeting. You can also find a summary of some of the notes said in this town hall from this extremely reliable source called Let's Run in the chat. Yeah, I don't find myself on Let's Run that much, but you know, this time it was actually kind of useful. In this town hall, they discussed what field size was desired. A small field at less than 100 athletes, a medium-sized field at about 150 to 200 athletes, or a large field size searching for 300 plus athletes per race. Now, historically, they have almost always tried to go for that medium-sized field. Of course, there's only a handful of people that actually have a chance at making the Olympic team, but they like the prestige and the event to be somewhat substantial. Way back in 2020, the marks were 2:19 for the men and 2:45 for the women. And then jump back to 2024. So they actually adjusted the women's mark all the way down to 2:37, an 8-minute jump to cut the field size dramatically, which definitely worked. On the men's side, they cut 2:19 down to 2:18. 2:37 for women is 5:59 per mile or faster, or 3:43 per kilometer. And then for the men, 2:18 was 5:15 per mile, which is definitely an elite level of running for both the men and the women's side, especially now because in 2024, the field sizes were pretty comparable. I think the women had somewhere around 190 athletes that qualified, and the men had about 220. Moving on to the 2028 qualifying standards. Disclaimer, these have not been officially announced, so this is not official. Do not quote me and say to your friends that I told you the official qualifying standards. This is the rumor going around, and I have some pretty reliable sources that this is going to be the qualifying standards, so you can pretty much plan on this. But again, don't quote me because there is still always a possibility that they change their minds after this video comes out. The women's side, good news for all of you women, it is not changing. They're leaving it at 2:37. And for the men, this is the news that is a bit of a shocker to many. No, they are not dropping it down to 2:17. They are skipping past 2:17 and dropping it all the way down to 2:16. Ouch. If you look at the list of the qualifiers, there were over 80 people of the 220 that had run between 2:17 and 2:18 to meet the mark. There was an additional 40 to 45 people that fell between 2:16 and 2:17. So if you take those numbers, you will see that about 60% of the athletes that qualified in the last cycle would not have qualified if the mark was set at 2:16. Of course, that doesn't account for all the people that would have paced differently and may have been able to run 2:16 had they just gone for that mark. However, I think it does illustrate the point that this qualifying standard is significantly harder to meet and is probably going to cut a lot of people out that may have qualified in previous Olympic cycles. Also in the past, you can qualify in the half marathon. Last cycle, it was 1:03 for the men and it was 1:12 for the women. I have not heard any of the rumors or seen the information on the half marathon, though I would predict and guess that they're not gonna budge with those marks because those are already pretty tough and only a handful of people qualified using their half marathon mark last time. So what do I think about this? I know there were some people that were advocating for much larger fields. The larger fields being an opportunity to grow the sport, to have a really big event. You know, imagine that almost every hometown had somebody who qualified, and then you could have lots of hometowns all around the country that are invested in watching this event to see how their athlete performs. By continuing to make it more and more prestigious, you're limiting the size and you're making it much harder to get in. For some positive talk here, I do like that it keeps the event very prestigious. If you qualify for the Olympic trials, it really means something and you really accomplish something very difficult. And that is continuing to be the case. So it does appear that they chose to stick with this medium field size and they wanted to just choke it down just a little bit on the men's side, a little bit more than last time. I'm gonna be honest, I'm not a huge fan of the men's change. The women's, totally fine. I think 2:37 is actually a perfect mark. It's also easy to remember. If you can run sub-6 for a marathon, you're gonna get in. For the men, 2:18 was already pretty tough and a lot of people failed to do it. I think that 2:17 would have been plenty hard enough and would have still limited the field size to get what they want. Now, time will tell in a couple of years. Maybe we'll see that it did get the right field size. We are making the leap from 5:15 per mile down to 5:11 per mile, and that is 3:13 per kilometer. That is a lofty goal for many people. And a lot of people are not gonna be able to achieve that, I'm gonna be honest. And the qualifying window is going to open September 1st. That is the rumor. I know they're planning to open it early enough for this year's fall marathons in 2025 to count, to qualify you for the Olympic trials in 2028. How am I preparing to hit this Olympic trials qualifying mark, and what tips do I have for you? Let's jump in. Speaking for myself, I want to go back just a little bit. For any of you that have been following me since I originally started on social media talking about my journey trying to qualify for the Marathon Olympic trials, you will remember that I had quite the story trying to qualify last time. I'll spare you the simple sob story. You can go back and watch those videos if you're really interested in seeing how my Olympic trials qualifying attempts went. But long story short, I had lots of marathons where I cramped pretty hard and I was not able to finish or even come close. And it all kind of came to one cumulative race at the McCurdy Micro Marathon in New York, where I ran 2:18:55, missing the mark by less than a minute. It was sad. And then a year later, of course, when the qualifying window was closed, I shattered the mark and ran 2:15:20, which actually would qualify me in the new standard. So all I have to do really to qualify is just do it again. The 2:15 was so much better and so much faster than 2:18. It's really quite the leap. It will be interesting to see how many people can pull it off. Now, to any of you who are hoping to qualify, here are some tips for you. Number one, start sooner than you think. You want to give yourself as many opportunities as possible. If you can, I would try to get your first attempt in this year since the window opens in just 3 months. Sign up for a marathon. Let's get it in. What's the word? Break the ice? Not break the ice. Bust the rust in your rust buster. You want to get an idea of what it's going to be like and you want to give yourself as many opportunities as possible. Next tip, set your marathon goal pace faster than the cutoff mark. Historically, if you're going to certain races, you will see that there will be a large group of people running exactly at OTQ pace. They'll call it the OTQ group, and there will be a huge pack of guys that at half marathon will be slightly smaller, and then at 15 will be a little bit smaller, and by 20 will be cut down even more, and there will only be a handful of people from that group that actually qualify. The majority of people in the race that actually get under the mark are the ones that went out faster. That's my challenge to you. Set your goal marathon pace faster than the OTQ. If you do that and you're able to hang on to that pace for a while, then you can allow for a little bit of fading at the end. Almost everybody you talk to, their marathon PR was not a perfect race. They went out faster than they actually finished. I mean, seriously, just think about it, talk to some people. It's pretty rare to actually even or negative split a marathon. So your best chance of qualifying, in my opinion, is to really train as if you're going to run much faster. Easier said than done, I know, you're like, take it for what it is. Maybe one final tip is going to be find someone else who has a similar goal that you can train with. It makes all the difference to be running workouts and hitting high mileage with someone else who is also trying to make the trials. And if you don't have anybody near you trying to do so, I don't know, you gotta start recruiting. You gotta convince somebody to start joining you, because it's gonna be real tough by yourself. Anyway, I was just hearing about these standards and I thought that I had to make a video talking about the new standards. This is going to be a big focus for me coming up real soon, especially after this Grandma's Marathon. The next marathon build will be for a qualifying standard. So let me know down in the comments, what do you think of the new qualifying standards? Let me know all of your thoughts down in the comments. I'm really interested to hear what people think. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.